The very patient member for Avalon.
Thank you for that. I have been patient, Mr. Speaker, because I listened to a good part of the member's speech, and he was quick to throw darts at the Liberal Party, who were the government of the day. He was quick to throw darts at the government, former Conservative government, but he didn't throw any darts back at the NDP. And you would know, but they were squeaky clean. They had the scandal of office rentals that went to court, and they all were ordered to pay back the money. So I wonder, has he and all the NDP members paid back the funds from the scandal that they had?
The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
This is why the Liberals, unfortunately, are going to find themselves in another part of this House after the next election, because they refuse to stand up. And it'll be an NDP government fixing things. And one of the things that we will never do, Mr. Speaker, I commit to that, we will never use or misuse the Board of Internal Economy for partisan purposes. And the member knows fully well what was involved in that scandalous time under the Harper government, where we saw basic parliamentary institutions, the Auditor General's Department slashed, the PBO slashed. The Board of Internal Economy turned into partisan, for partisan purposes. It simply was a low time in our democracy, and fortunately an NDP government will enhance our institutions, not diminish them.
Reprise du débat, continuing debate, and for a whole 12 minutes, the honourable member for Bradford-Brant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the good people of Bradford-Brant. But here we are, another day, yet another Liberal scandal. This time, a member for Edmonton Centre, a cabinet minister, who finds himself embroiled in yet another scandal that seems to be growing legs, Mr. Speaker. And what a legacy for this Prime Minister and members of his government to take with them when they are defeated in the next general election. A legacy of being the most corrupt, the most unethical government Canada has ever seen. But you know, this is not what the Prime Minister promised Canadians. In 2015, he talked about sunny ways, talked quite a bit about sunny ways, and in fact followed that up with an open letter to Canadians dated November the 4th, 2015, and I want to highlight certain passages. Canadians need to have faith in their government's honesty and willingness to listen. That is why we committed to set a higher bar for openness and transparency in Ottawa. But in order for you to trust your government, you need a government that will trust you. When we make a mistake, as all governments do, it is important that we acknowledge that mistake and we learn from it. We know that you do not expect us to be perfect, but you expect us to work tirelessly and to be honest, open, and sincere in our efforts to serve the public interest. He finalized the letter by saying this, Mr. Speaker: I am committed to leading an open, honest government that is accountable to Canadians, lives up to the highest ethical standards, brings our country together, and applies the utmost care and prudence in the handling of public funds. What an absolute joke, let alone disgrace to the Canadians who voted him into power into 2015. Because we've seen nothing but an open, honest, ethical government. And just to name a few of the scandals that we have discussed over the last 9 years. We all remember Gropegate. We remember Elbowgate. We remember blackface, with the Prime Minister not even remember how many times he wore blackface. We all remember the disgraceful comment to an...
Hey gang, just Aaron right here. This is happening right now, so we wanted to show it. But we'll get to an intro and a greeting and all that stuff in a bit. Don't want to interrupt Larry Brock for too long. Indigenous proud woman at a fundraiser. Thank you for your donation. We remember the experience it differently.
Point of order to the honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Yeah, I think he just misrepresented. The disgraceful comment was the leader of the Conservatives who said Indigenous people needed to learn how to work hard.
That's we're following the debate again. So I appreciate the help, but let's stick to the points of order for this House. The honourable member for Brantford Brant.
A point of order instead of disrupting all the time.
So where I was interrupted with not a point of order but debate was I was talking about experiencing it differently by our Prime Minister. We of course know the SNC scandal. We know the WE scandal, the ArriveCan scandal, which continues to be debated in committee and in this House, the Green Slush Fund scandal that is approaching $1 billion of wasteful taxpayer dollars.
Shame.
We remember foreign interference, that is still a problem with our democracy. We remember Billionaires Row condo scandal, and now, Mr. Speaker, we have the other Randy scandal. For the past 9 years, this Prime Minister has led the most ethically compromised government in Canadian history. It took him more than a year of foot-dragging to appoint an ethics commissioner. Probably because, without one, he and his government and his backbench wouldn't be investigated for bad, unethical behavior. From his frequent taxpayer-funded vacations, his protection of SNC Lavalin, granting a government contract to a company that gave money to his family members, handing out billions of dollars to well-connected Liberal insiders and consultants, the Prime Minister has a long track record of using government to benefit himself and his friends, and Liberal MPs are learning from the best. The Trudeau government has been slapped with 5 ethical violations.
The honourable, you can't use the name Trudeau.
Yes, thank you for that.
The Prime Minister.
Prime Minister's government, thank you, Mr. Speaker, has been slapped with 5 ethical violations, the most in Canadian history. Time after time, this Prime Minister has shown total contempt for our ethics laws. He himself has been the subject of 3 ethics investigations and was found guilty of breaking those laws twice. This Liberal government allows the culture of law-breaking to persist as 6 Liberals have been found guilty of breaking ethics laws. Several ministers in the Prime Minister's government, as well as the Prime Minister himself, found guilty in violation of numerous laws. In fact, the Prime Minister, as I indicated, has been found guilty on 2 occasions. The first was for accepting a 2016 vacation on the Aga Khan's private island while the Aga Khan was lobbying the government. The second was for improperly pressuring the Attorney General during the SNC Lavalin scandal to interfere in a prosecution. Similarly, the former Finance Minister breached ethics laws by failing to disclose ownership of a French villa held in a corporation and for overseeing federal dealings with We Charity, despite his family's financial ties to the organization. The former Fisheries Minister also violated conflict of interest rules by awarding a lucrative Arctic surf clam contract to a company linked to his wife's cousin. And additionally, the Minister of Small Business was found guilty of violating ethics laws for awarding a contract to a firm co-owned by her friend Amanda Alvaro. These cases, Mr. Speaker, underscore persistent issues of ethical lapses within this government. After 9 years, it is now the member for Edmonton Centre, the Employment Minister, who is caught yet in another ethics scandal. While serving as minister, just by way of background, Mr. Speaker, he co-owned GHI, Global Health Initiative, Imports, a company that secured questionable government contracts. Despite claiming to step away from the business, evidence leads to his continued involvement, ultimately violating ethics rules. His former business partner, Stephen Anderson, is now facing fraud charges, raising further questions about the misuse of taxpayer dollars. This minister has also faced criticism for false claims about his Indigenous heritage, which the government and he had to retract. This, combined with his ties to a lobbyist who secured $110 million in federal contracts and his company's receipt of $8 million in contracts, shows a pattern of misconduct. Canadians, Mr. Speaker, deserve accountability, but this Liberal government continues to protect its own instead of delivering solid, ethical leadership that Canadians expect. Before I get into the crux of the speech, I want to share for those listening that the conflict of interest requires cabinet ministers to divest their controlled interests either by selling them or placing them in a blind trust within 100 days of their appointment. It also forbids them from having any management or control over the trust assets. A minister would then be found breaking the law if he was found to have either managed or controlled the trust assets or the day-to-day business of the company itself. And I'll get into that later on in my speech and how it bodes very poorly for the Minister of Employment. So how does this all start? The mysterious Randy texts are at the heart of the probe in the Employment Minister's shady business dealings. A year after he joined the federal cabinet, revelations came about questioning about his involvement with GHI. When appearing at the Ethics Committee, the minister repeatedly denied that he was the Randy in question and stated that he never had any operational role in the company that he co-founded since his re-election in 2021, even though he still owns half of the shares in a number company that he in fact disclosed to the Commissioner. The first set of text messages obtained by Global News showed that Stephen Anderson, the co-founder of GHI, transferred an urgent message from a certain Randy to a Melvini Gwawi, principal of a PPE company in California, to send a wire transfer of $500,000 to secure a large shipment of nitrile gloves. The quote reads, and the text reads, "Additionally, Anderson, it takes 10 seconds to complete a transfer. I am telling you, we are not allocating like this. Please reach out and see what the reason is now. You assured me this morning that this was done first thing and allowed you to hold the stock today. It's midday and nothing is completed," reads the text. The message ends by telling Anderson to be ready in 15 minutes for a partner call. Anderson followed up with Gowie 30 minutes later, telling her that he spoke with Randy and other GHI employees who agreed to wait a little bit longer for the wire transfer. Those exchanges, Mr. Speaker, were dated September 8, 2022, which is almost a year after the minister was first sworn in Cabinet as Associate Minister of Finance. I see I've got 5 seconds left, so I will wrap up right there before I move into a second area. Thank you.
When we return, the honourable member will have about 9 minutes left in his speech. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Doxing is the unauthorized and malicious release of private.
Nope. We're shutting that guy down. We're doing something else. Hey gang, Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. How y'all doing? They're back in Parliament. They had a week off already. Like, they were in session for 4 weeks. They get a week off. Fine. Anyhow, we're back. We're ready to go. Yeah, hit a big number for my little channel here on the weekend. 25,000 people. We're trying to do it real here. Like, Again, I'm not great at any of the things that I do, but I try really hard to be, well, got these great moderators that help me out. But besides that, an amazing chat room that is rewarding to hang out in. The politics itself, like, it's a sad story, right? Like, all the time. It's a big disappointment to, when you find out they're always lying to your friends and family. Straight to you, and it's hard to know who to trust. Anyhow, Canadian Looney, smash the like, share, subscribe. We'll get into question period here. It's still probably 10 minutes out. We're going to run the intro. I'll update the memberships list. That's going to run during the intro. I update that on Tuesdays. So if your name's not there, it will be after tomorrow. And that's it. Thank you all for tuning in. We've got an amazing show. Should be wild, like question period this week. They're down in Peru bringing back like keys of liberal cult Kool-Aid mix, and should be pretty wild. I think Randy imported a lot of the ingredients already with his man Steven Anderson. We're going to show a piece of that too. Anyway, we're going to kick off this way. Let's go. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Oh, yeah.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF.
Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The world that works.
Thank you, Chris Murray. That's cool.
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
The 30th.
So we've got something to jump into right away. It's Michael Cooper doing what Larry Brock also just did, which is slamming, exposing, showing Randy Bolsonaro. People that follow my channel or watch some of my videos kind of know, like, this gig with Randy is up. He's toast. Like, he just continues to lie, and the lies get bigger. Now there's a coke deal with Anderson, who was running from Dominican Republic. They say, allegedly. What were they doing down in Peru, man? They were upping the cult Kool-Aid supply for the Christmas holidays. We're trying to have a little bit more fun, guys. The politics gets to you when you watch too much. Because they're like, I don't know, it's like playing poker and you're always being cheated. Like you're trying to play a straight game and they just keep, whatever, the dealer's in on it. I guess that's Greg Fergus. Anyhow, we'll jump into this next video. Then we're getting close on time. This is just a couple of seconds of
sitting
Michael
day
Cooper
following the
shooting
adoption
off.
of this order.
Fun. We'll get into question period right away then.
If a member participating in person wishes that the sub-amendment be carried or carried on division, or if a member of a recognized party participating in person wishes to request a recorded division, I would invite them to rise and indicate it to the chair. The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded division.
Pursuant to Standing Order 45, the division stands deferred until later this day. at the expiry of the time provided for oral questions. Ordre du jour.
Orders of the day.
Resuming debate on a privileged motion, failure of a witness to provide information to the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
Resuming debate, the honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, has 11 minutes left on the clock. The honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, what is it going to take for this Prime Minister to fire the Minister from Edmonton, the Minister of Employment? It seems that every day there are new revelations surrounding this scandal-plagued minister. And with each of these new revelations, it is crystal clear to seemingly everyone but the Minister and the Prime Minister that that Minister is about the last person in this House who should be sitting around the cabinet table. Let's look at the facts. The Minister of Employment was a partner with one Stephen Anderson in a shady PPE company called Global Health Imports. This is a company that has been sued by multiple clients and has been ordered by Alberta courts to pay back $7.8 million for ripping off clients. Those are judgments of Alberta courts. Not only that, the minister almost certainly violated the Conflict of Interest Act. More specifically, the Conflict of Interest Act is clear that a minister of the Crown shall not be involved in the operations of a business. Text messages reveal that someone named Randy from Global Health Imports was intricately involved in the business during the very same time that the Minister of Employment sat in Cabinet. More specifically, those text messages reveal that this Randy from Global Health Imports was involved in a $500,000 shakedown of a California-based client that had ordered PPE equipment. At the behest of this Randy, the client, the Gowie Group, transferred $500,000 to Global Health Imports. The PPE was never delivered, and the Gowie Group has commenced legal action claiming, among other things, wire fraud. Now, the Minister of Employment says he's not that Randy, except for the fact that at all material times the Gowie Group believed that the Randy in the text messages is the Minister of Employment. The minister's business partner, Stephen Anderson, has admitted that there is no one from Global Health Imports named Randy other than the minister. The text messages reference.
All right, gang. So I'm going to do a video on this afternoon, like in the earlier part of the House of Commons, the stuff that takes place before question period. I was watching that. I was watching like 5 committee meetings. I've got them all. So we'll be able to make a couple of good videos this evening. It's indoor weather, though. My goodness, it's been blowing from the north here. It feels like 2 weeks. A lot of rain, especially the last 10 days, and then the time change. Not a big fan of the time change. It's always dark. It's always dark. It's depressing. Anyways, we're crossing over into question period. And should be just about ready to start. It always happens this way, that when I cut to what's happening in the House of Commons, that it's somebody from the Bloc Québécois. And I don't... Anyways, once question period starts, we'll get back to it. We're going to watch Michael Cooper here finish up, because he's on a roll. Let's get back to that.
Randy as a partner. We know that the minister had been a partner. The text messages placed this Randy in Vancouver. Turns out the Minister of Employment was in Vancouver at the same time, and no one can find this other Randy. There's no plausible explanation as to who this other Randy could be. The only reasonable inference that can be drawn is that the Randy in the text messages
all the while
is the Minister of Employment. And therefore, the Minister of Employment broke the law and violated the Conflict of Interest Act, and on that basis alone should be out of cabinet. But, Mr. Speaker, there's more. Recently we learned that Global Health Imports, while the minister was an active partner in the company, made 2 bids for federal contracts in which the company held itself out as a wholly owned Indigenous company. Now, the problem with that is that it isn't a wholly owned Indigenous company because neither and.
The problem is that it's a lie. It's crazy these things are happening in Canadian federal politics. If you think about it too much, it makes you really angry because, like, it's a big lie, big dupe. Anyhow, got to roll with it, guys. Like, stay informed, know all these things are happening. Question period should be just about going. At least it's Kevin Lamoureux. He's almost laughable. Here, let's check this.
Behind the Housing Accelerator Fund, better yet, do a flip-flop and support the program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Oral questions, questions orales.
There we go. We
The Honourable
timed that pretty
Leader
well.
of the Official Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is still acting like a firefighter who's setting fires. Now he's blaming immigration on bad actors instead of himself. He decided to open the door to 725,000 asylum seeker requests in 5 years. He approved a 211% increase in international students. He allowed foreign workers in communities with high levels of unemployment. If there are bad actors, should he not look in the mirror? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that Canadians expect any responsible government to take decisive actions. And you saw the levels I tabled last week, a 20% decrease in permanent resident. And the PBO himself has said that we have to meet our housing needs. And the member across the way wants to go to election. He has no plan. Perhaps in terms of math, he said that they'll build 6 units and he can count to 6. So, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Maniac masquerading as a firefighter, this time on immigration. He blames bad actors for his decisions on that destroyed our immigration system. He decided to increase and open the door to 726% more asylum claims. He decided to approve 211% more international students. He decided to lift the ban on temporary foreign workers in communities with already high unemployment. If the Prime Minister is hunting for the quote-unquote bad actors who ruined the system, will he have a look in the mirror?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mark Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think we'll take any lessons from someone who spent the last 20 years lighting fires in the House of Commons. That's it. We put forward a plan 2 weeks ago to reduce immigration levels by 20%. Canadians expect us to be responsible and to react to their needs. That's what we're doing with this plan. The Parliamentary Budget Officer himself has said that this new plan will reduce housing needs by 50%. That's what Canadians want. It's responsible.
Very good.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Employment Minister first denied that he and his company were profiting off government business, and then text messages showed the contrary. They referred to a Randy. Well, he claimed that it was another Randy. We now know there is no other Randy. We know he falsely claimed he was Indigenous in order so that his company could steal resources that were meant for real Indigenous people. And now his company address matches the address of a place that was the location of 2 cocaine busts. Any one of these things would be a resigning offense. Why won't he resign now?
Order. The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, I know the person referred to in today's article. I've never met that person. I've had no dealings with her whatsoever. Those are the facts.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Apparently the person he doesn't know is himself. He says that he's not the Randy in the text messages, but his own business associates say there is no other Randy. He says that he said that he was Indigenous in order that he could get grants and contracts that were meant just for Indigenous people. Now he admits he's not Indigenous at all. And now, while his company has the same address as a place that has 2 cocaine busts, he says he doesn't know the person involved in that address either. Does this minister even know who he is?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, the article states...
And ask all members, please. There's... The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development from the top.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know the person referred to in the article today. I've never met her. I've had no dealings with her whatsoever. The article states that fact, and that is the fact.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After the Prime Minister took his private jet, burned 105 tons of jet fuel, and emitted 300 tons of greenhouse gases to go down to Brazil, he claimed that Canadians who are opposed to his carbon tax are just confused by disinformation. No, Canadians aren't stupid, Mr. Speaker. They know that the Parliamentary Budget Officer has calculated that 100% of middle-class Canadians pay more in the tax than they get back. The Prime Minister already also said, though, that this will be the subject of the next election. I couldn't agree more. So why don't we have a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for... Order. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources. And
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, it would be nice if the Leader of the Opposition was not spouting disinformation and misinformation in the House. At the end of the day, 8 out of 10 Canadian families, the vast majority of Canadians, get more money back. It is those that actually live on the most modest incomes that are the best off as a result of the price on pollution. But I would also say it is a price on pollution. It is about addressing climate change, something that organization across the NDA simply has no idea how to do and does not care.
The honourable member for La Prairie. The next few hours will be critical for our agriculture. Senators Peter Boehm and Peter Harder have literally sabotaged Bill C-282. They amended it to prevent it from protecting supply management in existing trade agreements. Imagine, while Donald Trump wants to reopen NAFTA, these guys want to serve him supply management on a silver platter. The Senate could vote on this amendment as early as tomorrow, so all the party leaders have to speak out, starting with the Prime Minister. Will he ask the senators to defeat the amendment and dental care. And the NDP also worked really hard to put it in place. So 1 million Quebecers now have their dental care card, and they want to move forward with this in 2025. We're going to sign up more Quebecers and Canadians between 18 years and up.
The honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, working and now middle-class families are cutting back on their groceries. They're getting less and getting gouged at the till by greedy CEOs. Liberals let this happen and are letting families down. Conservatives will cut and cost families even more. They'll take away important services like...
Sorry, gang, I haven't seen the comments yet. Like, I realized that during I talked to everybody that's in the room. This mic has a really bad spot where there's an on-off button. I need to fix that, and I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm not going to let it distract me back into...
like dental care, costing families thousands of dollars a year. The NDP's tax-free essentials plan removes the GST from grocery items to bring families relief. Will the Liberals take the tax off grocery items so Canadians can get a break?
The The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I would agree with the member that what we're going to see from the Conservative is cut, Mr.
That's
Speaker.
right.
They're going to cut dental care. They're going to cut child benefit. Mr. Speaker, Canadians at home know that on this side of the House, we will always stand for the middle class. We will always stand on those who are working hard to join the middle class. We will fight for Canadians as we've done on grocery. We will build more homes, Mr. Speaker. We will create economic opportunities. We will fight for workers. We will create jobs. We will create opportunities and possibilities for this country so the middle class can thrive, Mr. Speaker. 9 years.
On a couple of occasions, I've caught the voice of the Honourable Member from New Westminster Burnaby. I'm going to ask him, please, to not speak when he's not recognised by the House. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Seems like every time the employment minister finds rock bottom, it keeps getting worse. First, he said he wasn't the Randy involved in his company, but we know there was only one Randy at his company. He said he wasn't involved with his company while in cabinet, and text messages reveal that he is. He said that he was Indigenous to profit from government contracts stealing from First Nations communities, and now there's new news of coordinating business activities with drug smugglers and convicts. This is the behavior of a low-life fraud, not a federal cabinet minister. Simple question. How does that guy still have his job?
Good question.
Order. Order. The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, despite the innuendo, here are the facts. I don't know the person in question. I never met that person in question. And Mr. Speaker, those are simply the facts. The article even says that I've never met the person in question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, here are the facts.
Did you catch that, though, that he said, I never met that person in person? He says it like semantics,
He flaunts
right?
the ethics rules. He claims
dishonest.
a false identity. He gets caught in a web of lies. That's what the Prime Minister rewards after 9 years. With each passing day, we find out more about the Employment Minister's scams and schemes, and we learn that he's just a phony and a fraud. Canadians want to know. Indigenous communities who stole from him, who he stole from, want to know. And Liberal backbenchers want to know when the Prime Minister is going to fire that cabinet minister.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know the person in the article from today. I've never met the person in the article from today. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives may not like it, but it's actually in the article that I don't know the person in question. Never met them.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberal minister from Alberta is a fake and a fraud. He said he was not the Randy involved in his company, but we know that there's only one Randy. He said he wasn't involved in his company at the cabinet table.
I'm going to ask colleagues. Today we've been skating close to the line in terms. Excuse me, colleagues. I will start my comment again if you would give me the privilege of listening. At several occasions today, we've been skating close to the line in terms of what's acceptable language. The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, I think, has skated over that line and accusing a direct member. Can I ask the Honourable Member to withdraw that comment and start his question from the top, please?
We start, Speaker, that this Liberal minister from Alberta has been implicated in fraud and media reports. Today, we've seen that. It's very clear.
I'm just going to, I'm not certain if I was having trouble hearing the member. I don't think I heard the withdraw. If you could withdraw and start again, I would appreciate it. If members were not to take the floor while a member is being recognized, the Speaker will be able to hear the member. The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Withdrawing the previous words, Speaker, will talk about this Liberal minister from Alberta who has been implicated in media reports in fraud. Some of them he's even apologized for. He misrepresented his identity, claiming to be Indigenous, trying to steal contracts from people who are in fact Indigenous. This same minister said that he wasn't the Randy at his own company. We know that there was only one Randy at that company. It's pandemic profiteering. We know that there's allegations of fraud. Why is it that this Prime Minister just won't fire that minister?
Okay, Barrett, I saw him earlier discussing this thing. I meant to show it before question period started. He's on fire today. Like, they're going for Randy hard. Is Randy going to get back up?
The honourable member, the honourable minister for employment and workforce development.
Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite just said is simply not true.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's unbelievable that with the cocaine connections to the Liberal minister from Alberta, that those Liberals, that Prime Minister, want to allow him to continue to be in cabinet. He said that he was Indigenous to try and steal contracts from individuals who are Indigenous. That's okay as long as you are a Liberal. The company is involved in more than half a dozen lawsuits because of fraud, and that's okay as long as you're a Liberal. They came before committee and said things that we now know weren't true, like it must have been some other Randy. If he won't resign, why won't this Prime Minister fire that fraudster?
Oh my God, that's pretty hot, guys. Pretty cute.
Again, members at the very last possible moment used a word which would not be considered acceptable. Can I just ask the honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes to please withdraw that last word?
Oh my, come on. Don't get booed.
I'll withdraw the last word. He should be fired.
I thank the honourable member. The honourable minister for employment and workforce development.
Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite said, once again, is not true.
The honourable member for Mégantic-Le-Hable. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Official Languages campaigned as a successful entrepreneur, but he's an imposter. We know that he said he wasn't involved in his company when he was a minister, but the text messages show the opposite. He was taking money destined for First Nations communities. He said he was a journalist even though he was a lobbyist. When will the Prime Minister fire this professional fake? The Honourable Minister of Employment and Workforce Development. Mr. Speaker, despite the insinuations, I have never met that person in question in today's article. I've never dealt with her. I've never met her. Those are the facts. The honourable member from Mégantic-Le-Hable. Mr. Speaker, there are so many Randys that they didn't even understand the question I asked him. But the Minister of Official Languages presented himself as a successful entrepreneur and journalist. But he said he worked for Radio-Canada and Les Affaires, and even the editor-in-chief of Les Affaires said it was obvious he wasn't a journalist. He was uncovered, even though the Prime Minister made many efforts to protect him. When will the Prime Minister fire his fake minister? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the statements of that member are false. Order, please.
Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is unable to acknowledge that he's responsible for the crises caused by the rapid increase in immigration. Even in his mea culpa
So we're going to try this again, guys. I know I screwed up on the mic before. I'm embarrassed all the time. I know that I should be better at audio by now. Like, I do know that I should be. I just don't like wearing the headset. Whatever. I'm a weirdo. I just don't like... I live by myself. It's a big old house. I can't hear when I've got those on. Anyways, Lois Hurst, how you doing? Good to see you. Two Flips, my man, how you doing? Angry Canadian Annie G, Backyard Garden, good to see you. Charlene Hopper, always a pleasure. Are you listening or are you watching? Chris Murray, whatever that was, glad that we have you back in the chat. Dan H, Dicker D, Don Boulay, Gus Papas, James Vahey, Jason the Conservative, Jolene the Conservative Gal. What's up? You guys sound like a team. Julie Mack, good to see you. Captain Kirk, always a pleasure. You're my guy. Never forget it. Late Walker, Lois Hurst, we caught you earlier. Lorraine VJ, Mark Works, Mike Malash, always a pleasure. First to the worm, or early bird gets the worm. Mofo 13, Patty Zadow, Tadow, touchdown. My girl, Rita D'Alessandro, what's up? Robosh Green, SW, Sasquatch Brett, Scott Campbell, my brother, Steve Bloys, Storm, good to see you. Sylvain Robert, Tanya Warner, True Blue, my man, what's up? Sorry I missed it. This has this little, very soft touch button, and you don't even mean to hit it, and it'll turn your mic off. Anyways, back to, again, we didn't miss anything. It's the block doing nothing. Good to see everybody.
Sure. He should have considered the capacity of the country before drastically increasing the population as he did. Second, he should have listened to all the people's warnings that it wasn't working, but he was too blinded by his own multiculturalist pipe dream to base his immigration policies on facts and reality. Does he realize that yesterday's mea culpa is far too little, far too late, and far too easy after so much irresponsibility? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Let's remind everyone of the facts. Since 2009, the Quebec government tripled immigration in some areas that they control. These are the facts where we're going to work together to reduce this. The plan that I put forward last week proposes a 20% reduction. It's responsible, it's important, it's what Canadians and Quebecers are asking us for.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The Minister from Edmonton is a fake and a phony. He said that he was not the Randy...
I'm going to ask, this is a couple of times that I've asked the honourable members. I'm going to ask the honourable members again to remember when they speak directly to members, they have to be...
My guess here is that the Conservatives came into such so much more evidence that they know it's a law case, and now they're kind of rubbing it in the Liberals' faces, which is kind of funny to see the way they're all going to stick by Randy and be like, oh no, this is the best team we can possibly have, rather than say like, oh no, we do have a corrupt minister, got to get rid of him. They're all going to stand. And again, Greg Fergus is supposed to be in the middle here. He's not. He's liberal. You guys all know this. But
of course, extend to them all the respect that each member, as members, are deserving of. So I'm going to ask the honourable member, please, to rephrase this question to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, this minister deserves to be criticized in the People's House, the House of Commons. He said he was not the Randy
come on.
involved in his company. company, but we know there's only one Randy at the company. He said he wasn't involved in the operations of the company, but text messages reveal that he is. He said he was Indigenous to profit from government contracts, trying to steal from First Nations communities. When will the Prime Minister fire this phony for making false claims to steal from First Nations?
I think he's only 36.
I'm going to invite all members to be very judicious in terms of the use of their language in this place. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
God,
Mr. Speaker, my colleague has addressed this issue and stated that those claims are false. Mr. Speaker, we addressed the fact that that business was never listed as an Indigenous business on the procurement site, and it in fact received no funding from the Government of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good answer.
Good answer. Yeah. Again, much respect to Sunshine Baby for that petition.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The company did actually receive funding from the Government of Canada. The Minister of Employment's business partner claimed that their company was fully Indigenous owned. How would he have gotten that impression? Maybe because the Liberal Party repeatedly said that the minister was Indigenous. Now, it is possible to get kicked out of the Liberals' Indigenous caucus, not for corruption, but for refusing to participate in corruption, as Jody Wilson-Raybould found out. After 9 years, they've gone from firing the first Indigenous Attorney General to keeping the first fake Indigenous Minister of Employment. When will the Prime Minister fire this phony minister?
I'm going to encourage all members to be more judicious in their use of their words and referring directly to other members. The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Service Public,
Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's spin it into
Our
French.
colleague knows full well that in the House we have to choose the right words to express things properly. He would like to, if he'd like to know more about the procurement process in favor of Indigenous companies, what's really important for Canadians, he should ask it so in a respectful way, and I would be happy to meet with him to explain to him how things work. I will encourage the honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent, please, to not speak until he's recognized by the chair.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's only minister from Alberta is accused of being a fake and a fraud. The member from Edmonton Centre said he wasn't the Randy involved in his company. Yet we know he is the only Randy involved in that company. He said he wasn't involved with his company while in cabinet, yet text messages clearly show that he was. He pretended to be Indigenous to profit from government contracts, effectively stealing from First Nations businesses. Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. When will the Prime Minister do his job and fire that minister?
That's Chair of the Committee again.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, my colleague has addressed those issues that the colleague raises, and he has clarified that they are false. Mr. Speaker, we have stated that that business was not listed as an Indigenous business, and it did not receive funding through that program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good.
Did anybody see Stephanie Cousy call her out on that the other day? She said, the bigger the scam, the lower she talks. It's a fun clip. I should find it before the end of the show. I might have to go on that.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, families are getting gouged on essentials by greedy CEOs. Liberals have let families down. And the Conservatives, all they're planning to do is cut like the National School Food Program, making kids go hungry. But there's good news, Mr. Speaker. The NDP's plan to remove GST on life essentials like kids, clothing and diapers will bring relief to so many families. Will the Liberals follow the NDP's lead and cut the GST so families can get ahead?
She has no soul.
The Honourable Minister for Families and Children.
as the member has rightly pointed out, on this side of the House, we're moving forward with a national school food program, which we've heard again and again the leader of the Conservative Party call bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, Mr. Speaker, is not what is happening. We are seeing thousands of children already this school year receive food at school because of this investment in our children. We'll continue to work with the provinces to see this roll out across the country, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian families are getting gouged on essentials while the biggest corporations are posting massive profits. And the Liberals could have prevented this, but instead they've let Canadians down. Now, Conservative cuts would make matters far worse. In fact, cutting childcare alone would cost Canadian families up to $13,000 per child. The NDP has a plan to take the GST off essentials like home heat, phone and internet bills, kids' clothing. Will the Liberals do it?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, it's great to hear this member speak about the importance of the investments that we've made in childcare. Mr. Speaker, we've seen almost 1 million families. These are real people, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to support.
Just in case you're wondering, this is what happened, like right there, right? What we're seeing right there, that face, that's what happens when you get like a naive, stupid person involved in your cult and you pollute them with Kool-Aid. Maybe was a good person before. Now they're corrupted. Like Jenna Suds, I remember like a year ago when you were given this position, I was like, oh, maybe she'll be a good, they all sell out. Like, she sold out. And now listen to her. She'll throw an insult here at the end, maybe. Like she does it all the time.
To get them into affordable, high-quality childcare, saving them thousands of dollars each and every year. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have made it clear they do not support affordable childcare. They will do everything they can to take this away from the families that need it.
So she's a fear monger. Like, again, a year ago when I first saw her, like her first time, she didn't do what she does now.
Here.
We've been watching.
I'm going to invite ministers and members of the opposition to have their conversations outside and not on over the floor while someone else is speaking or has the microphone. Then the honourable member from Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, we found out the Conservative leader is silencing his own caucus, barring them from promoting federal housing funds in their own constituencies. One Conservative MP told CBC MPs are being stopped from helping their cities for partisan reasons. Conservative MPs, like the member for Kelowna Lake Country, whose community is receiving over $31 million in federal funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund, have had a pretty rough time back in the riding. So, can the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities tell us about the impact Conservative leaders' cuts would have on Kelowna?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
You may have seen the news, Mr. Speaker, but last week the Conservatives had a very bad week. First, their leader went out in public to announce that he was cutting billions of dollars in funding directly to communities to build more homes, but later it was revealed that his MPs were advocating for that fund and were since banned from advocating on behalf of their communities. I don't know about you, Mr. Speaker, but my constituents want to make sure that they're the boss, not the leader of our party up here. It seems that is not true. But when we look at the example in Kelowna, let's take a look at what the mayor said. To replace this funding, he would need to look at other options like borrowing, reserves, or tax increases. Tax increases on the Conservative side, money for communities.
It's very clear to the Speaker that everybody got a lot of rest during this last week. Going to ask members, please.
Mr. Speaker refers to himself in third person. Like, it's kind of weird to refer to yourself in third person.
Once again, don't take the floor unless they're being addressed. The honourable member, Excuse me, for the honourable member from Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, it's clear that this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost or the corruption. Now we have a Minister of Employment who says he sees nothing, he hears nothing, he knows nothing, but there's too much here to pass up. First, he claimed he wasn't the other Randy implicated in his business partner's text messages. We now know that he was. Then he claimed that he had no active role in his company's operations while he served in cabinet. We now know that he did. And we now know that he claimed Indigenous heritage and status, and it was a complete fabrication. These attempts to steal funds earmarked for Indigenous companies is fraudulent. When will enough be enough for this Prime Minister? When will he fire this minister?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Deux premières.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two things. First of all, what the member just said is false. And secondly, the minister has explained himself.
Again, not to get into it, but like we will start analyzing some of the tactics I think the Liberals use. Like they were just asked a question en anglais, and they send in this Fruit Loop that is, they say francophone. I just think he's autistic or something. Like, but he's managed to be a cabinet minister in Trudeau's corrupt little cupboard, and they send him in to answer this English condescendingly en français. I don't know if you can speak French. Like, I can understand these words for sure. That's easy. And I think it's part of the Liberal tactic just to not get people to watch. Because it's disgusting to watch this stuff. Like,
repeatedly. What we have still not heard today is why the Conservative leader still has taken hundreds of days to get his security briefing, not just to protect himself, but to protect his own members. His only priority is to trigger an election. How can he expect to hold an election without being able to protect the security of his party and his members?
From Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this minister keeps explaining himself, but the answers aren't coming. The minister's facing multiple scandals. We know that his company has been charged with fraud. We know that he was illegally involved while he served in cabinet. We know that the minister for years claimed that he had Indigenous heritage, and we now know that's a complete fabrication. And today we learned that the minister's company shared a post office box with a known international cocaine dealer. At best, the minister has shown abhorrent judgment, and at worst, he is completely corrupt. The fact that this Prime Minister continues to have confidence in him demonstrates exactly why he's not fit to lead this country. When will this Prime Minister fire this minister?
They're going hard at Randy, and they should.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
How low she's going to talk.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague has stated that those are all false, and he did not know this person in question. But if you want to talk about fit for leadership, you should be asking his own leader why he has not yet gotten a security clearance. Because if that's someone who wants to lead the country, they should probably know what risks are facing Canadians. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are wondering why the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada has not gotten a security clearance. Thank you.
Yes, they are wondering that.
The Honourable Member from Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. The Prime Minister is jetting around the globe promoting his failed carbon tax while Canadians line up at the food banks. According to the Prime Minister, the carbon tax is, quote, the best tool out there, and anyone who disagrees is using, quote, propaganda. But Canada's Environment Commissioner disagrees. He revealed the Liberals will not meet their own emission targets despite quadrupling the carbon tax.
That's right.
It's all pain and no gain. So will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very
disingenuous
much
for the Conservatives to continually link the food bank situation in Canada with carbon pricing. There's a 108-page report that they produced. The Food Banks Canada came forward and made 4 recommendations around Canada's social safety net. And not once in that 108-page report did they mention the carbon tax or carbon pricing, because they know that Canada's carbon rebate that comes out 4 times a year supports Canadians, particularly lower and middle-income Canadians, Mr. Speaker. They should cut out the misinformation and stop being so disingenuous, particularly on the backs of lower-income Canadians.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, here are the facts. After 9 years of this Liberal government's posturing, Canada has the worst environmental performance in the G7. The Environment Commissioner found that emissions reductions weren't because of anything government did. They're thanks to a review of data and a change in methodology. In short, Mr. Speaker, the 2 Liberal carbon taxes don't work, and now the government's planning a 3rd carbon tax. An overall export tax. If they're so sure of themselves, why don't they call an election on it? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment. Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. It's a very important question. Canada's performance and industry's performance when it comes to climate change is important.
The oil and gas sector is the one that's continually increasing their emissions, and we're challenging the oil and gas industry with a pollution cap. We're asking them to invest some of their astonishing $66 billion in profit in making their products more efficient and lowering the carbon intensity of their oil. That's a good challenge, Mr. Speaker.
Well said, well said.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, the media recently reported that fraudsters were taking full advantage of CRA and claiming bogus tax refunds. According to Radio-Canada, the agency hasn't understood the need to clean up its act. Instead of going after fraud and malpractice, they've launched a witch hunt to find out who's talking to reporters. Managers have even gone so far as to spy on employees' computers. They don't want to deal with the problem, they just want to shoot the messengers. Will the minister ask the agency to track down on fraudsters instead of whistleblowers? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are situations that need to be reported, and that's why we supported a block bill. But, Mr. Speaker, if I were to publicly share information that comes under the Income Tax Act, I could be liable to 7 years imprisonment. Mr. Speaker, employee staff, agency staff also need to protect the tax base. So it's important to remind them of their duties and obligations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member.
They're already like trying to scare us about like being sent to the gulag. Like there is a communist takeover. It would seem like to me, because people would 10 years ago they'd be like, we want to be socialist. We were socialists then. Like this other thing where everybody's I won't be able to live under a thing like that. Like, again, I'm not a crazy person or anything, but like I should be allowed to share what it is I see in real time, have opinions on it, and share it with people. We're not like organizing some nut cult that's trying to take over Canada, change everything around like our current government is doing.
Member for Trois-Rivières.
That was a big
Imagine fraudsters have gotten millions of dollars in bogus tax refunds because CRA didn't check before transferring the money. So the agency wrote to its staff not to ask them to tighten up the checks, to ask them to keep their mouths shut. Management thinks the main problem isn't fraud, it's the media. We need accountability, and accountability starts with protecting whistleblowers, not fraudsters. Will the minister do something about the total lack of ethics in CRA senior management? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue.
Good question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is mixing things up. There are two very distinct things here, but I can assure him that when it comes to CRA, we take fraud very seriously. We have very professional teams working on fraud. We have strategies. We work in partnership with the RCMP, with financial institutions, with our international partners. There are a number of levels of security to catch these fraudsters, and I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the agency is a prime target, obviously, with the benefits and the checks that we pay out, but we are doing a good job all the same.
The honourable member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Now, the Prime Minister got on his taxpayer-funded carbon-emitting jet, flew to Brazil, and bragged about how great his punitive carbon tax is. His carbon tax has done nothing for the environment while literally making life's basic necessities unaffordable. The Prime Minister called it the best tool out there, but the only tool that Canadians want is a ballot box. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, Canada's emissions are lower now than they've been since all of Connor McDavid's life. Last time they were this low was 1997. Our emissions are down because of industrial carbon pricing, because of pricing on consumer fuels, and because of the over 100 measures that this government has undertaken to lower our emissions and protect the environment. And what have the Conservatives done over that same time? They voted against every single measure, Mr. Speaker. It's not just us that think carbon pricing is effective, it's also William Nordhaus, who has a Nobel Prize to prove it. So if even one Conservative economist, if they could find one that said they've got a solution for fighting climate change, we'd love to hear it.
Absolutely.
The honourable member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
Under this Prime Minister's carbon tax regime, grocery prices have skyrocketed to the point that scurvy is now a serious health concern in Canada. 27 cases of scurvy have been identified in northern Saskatchewan. The Prime Minister wants to blame, quote, propaganda, misinformation, and flat-out lies for opposition to his carbon tax. But unlike him, Canadians do not get to turn a blind eye to the affordability challenges that they face. Will the Prime Minister show some compassion and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Canada is second in the G7 on health span, second only to Japan. We're 1 year longer than both France and Italy in terms of the number of years we live in good health. We are 2 years better than the United Kingdom. We are 6 years longer than the United States. You know, when you're talking about things that have been gone for a long time, let's talk about what's happening with measles. Let's talk about what's happening with misinformation generally. The approach to attacking public health that the Conservatives are taking, the attack on information, puts lives at risk and fundamentally endangers our health system, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Toronto St. Paul's.
Goodness. Fact. This Liberal Prime Minister is out of touch. First, he gets on a gas-guzzling jet. Then, he glorifies the punishing carbon tax that Canadians pay. And everyone who disagrees, he says, quote, they're using propaganda, misinformation, and flat-out lies. Meanwhile, more than 1 in 10 people in Toronto are using food banks, and 87% of them are living in unaffordable housing. Enough is enough. Why won't the Prime Minister treat Canadians like adults, let them decide, and call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a fact that 300 economists in this country have all said that a price on pollution is an effective way to reduce emissions, and the majority of Canadians actually get more money back.
That is a lie, guys. Straight up, like June 17th, the budget officer testified that that is untrue. And he's going with a different study that doesn't, like, it's not law. Like, that's not on the record. He's going with, like, a news clip rather than the facts. Again, Jonathan Wilkinson, we're probably going to make a video about you tonight rather than Randy. Everybody knows Randy's guilty, but this guy, Jonathan Wilkinson, kind of seems like he's simple or harmless. He is one of the biggest spreaders of this propaganda lie
in rebates. It is a fact that the parliamentary budget officer said exactly the same thing. On this side of the House, we have a plan that is about addressing affordability issues. It is about growing a clean economy for the future, and it is about fighting climate change. My goodness, it is time that some of those folks across the way at least accept the reality of climate change and have something positive to say.
The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Mr. Speaker, we know the Conservative leaders had a rough week because of the scandal surrounding his plan to cut the housing agreement with Quebec. Today, we announced a significant plan to invest in housing in Quebec, which will add thousands of social and affordable housing units to the existing stock. Can the Minister of Public Services and Procurement tell this House about the impact of today's announcement and the potential impact of the Conservative leaders' cuts for Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Good news, Mr. Speaker. We announced this morning
good news.
$92 million being added to the historic agreement with Quebec. They're building 3,000 new housing units. It's a big problem for the Conservative leader who says that housing simply doesn't exist. What would the Conservative leader do that would affect the Conservative members from Quebec, where there are hundreds of these housing units currently being built? How long are they going to put up with this?
The honourable member from Kelowna
Why
Lake
is he so excited?
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost of housing. The failing Liberal housing plan is not building more homes. Housing starts are down last month compared to 2023. 11% in Canada, 30% in BC, and 87% in Kelowna. I've talked to home builders and residents in my community who all support the common sense Conservative plan to axe the GST on new homes sold under $1 million. Will the NDP Liberals agree with home builders and families and axe the GST on new homes sold?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
I am very happy to correct the record that my Conservative colleagues put on the floor of the House of Commons. Housing starts are actually up this month 8% compared to last month, and year over year are trending in a positive direction, near the all-time record home building pace that Canada has ever seen. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that this question would come from...
Again, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to. Like, I'm a good old Nova Scotian Canadian boy. Like, I know that I'm one of the good ones. Like, there's a bunch of good ones from the area that I grew up, and there's a lot of good ones from the area where this asshole Sean Fraser grew up. Great people. He's not one of them, though. Like, that dead-eyed whatever, that's an acquired look. He's a fraud and a bully and a gangly talker.
This particular member who represents the city of Kelowna, which received $31.5 million to build thousands and thousands of more homes. Not only is she opposed to that investment, her leader is barring her and every one of her colleagues from advocating on behalf of their communities. I came here to represent my community in Ottawa, not to take my leader's words back home.
The Honourable Member from Brantford Brant.
He was talking
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Police associations nationwide are demanding urgent bail legislation to keep our communities safe. Yet just this morning, a stolen BMW crashed into a Toronto bus, injuring 9 people, 2 critically. 2 of the 4 accused were, surprise, surprise, out on bail, including 1 for a violent robbery. If the safety and security of Canadians is no longer a priority for this Prime Minister, will he call in the...
We're going to put it on pause and back 10 seconds. Like, look over Larry's shoulder. This guy, Philip Lawrence, who's an MP, I think from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, one of the prairies, and possibly Ontario. But watch his reaction to what Larry says right here. Watch his reaction over Larry's shoulder.
4 accused were, surprise, surprise, out on bail, including one for a violent robbery. If the safety and security of Canadians is no longer a priority for this Prime Minister, will he call an immediate election so that Conservatives can bring jail, not bail, for repeat violent offenders?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, the incident this morning in Toronto is a concern for all of us in this House, all of us who believe in prioritizing public safety and...
It's a Liberal tactic. It's got to be on purpose. Why would you put Arif Farani, who is the Justice Minister, Attorney General, like all the people that are just walking away from doing crimes and doing more crimes right after that are his responsibility.
Community safety. What's concerning and what people need to understand is that calls for bail reform echoed in this chamber 18 months ago. We responded, tabled legislation, and with the cooperation of all parties, we got it passed. Now the ball goes to the province's court. What we need to ensure is that that very person who should have been detained, did the Crown contest that bail? Did the Crown decide to appeal the bail if the bail decision was made in error? Was there enough space in detention facilities run by the province to hold that person in detention? These are important questions. We need answers.
We need answers, but that's not like you were asked a question and you're saying we need answers. You're the Attorney General, dude. It is time.
I'm going to invite the Honourable Member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou, please, to not take the question, or not take the floor unless is recognised by the Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, crime is everywhere in Canada, and the Liberal government is willfully blind. Even the leader of the Bloc says there's no crime in our regions. We read this morning that a mother will have to pay $7,000 a year for car insurance because her car has been stolen multiple times. It's always our constituents who end up paying for the inaction of this Liberal government. When will this Bloc Liberal government punish crime, even in rural Canada? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, our colleague is falsely using the term inaction. He knows full well that our government for many years now has been investing in the police, whether it's the RCMP, the CBSA, or even our provincial and municipal partners in fighting auto theft. This situation is wholly unacceptable to Canadians, and what's good news is that the number of cars being stolen is decreasing, but that's not enough. We will continue to do everything we can to support our police and put an end to this situation.
Honourable Member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, from the rising cost of living to climate change, we know young people today face unique challenges. Their mental health needs are complex. Our government is making sure that young Canadians get the care they need, when and where they need it. It's a promise we put forward in 2021 to build a stronger, more resilient Canada. Today, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions announced the launch of the Youth Mental Health Fund. Can she share details about this historic investment with the House?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Scarborough Agincourt for being such a tremendous, unwavering advocate for mental health in this country. Mr. Speaker, community organizations are the lifeline when it comes to mental health that's local and that is trusted. This fund, $500 million investment, once in a generation, to make a difference for our youth, to make sure that they have access to the services that they trust the most, adding capacity, filling gaps, and making sure we meet them where they're at. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the youth of today, we want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to thrive, because when they thrive, Canada succeeds.
Bravo. Brilliant. The Honourable Member from Edmonton, Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, a UN report has found that Israel's warfare in Gaza is consistent with the characteristics of genocide. The Liberal government is legally obligated by the Genocide Convention to prevent and stop Netanyahu's attack on Palestinians. Turning a blind eye to mass casualties is not an option. Entire families have been decimated. Children are starving to death. When will the Liberals live up to their obligations, sanction Netanyahu and his extreme cabinet, and finally put in place an actual arms embargo?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, before he takes the floor, I just want to encourage all members, to remind members to be very careful about what they wear in this House to ensure that it is not considered a prop. The Honourable Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think everyone in this House realizes that the situation in Gaza is dire, that the situation faced by men, women and children in Gaza is horrendous, and we will continue to seek every possible way to find peace.
Besides the attacks against Canada from the latest band of crazy folk from asylum seekers, I don't have anything to say about the war in the Middle East.
Peace with justice in this situation. However, rhetoric doesn't help, symbols don't help. Hard work, diplomacy, and engagement will be what Canada needs to do on this every day. We'll continue to do our part to bring peace in the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, many closed work permit holders have their renewal applications rejected for want of an impact assessment, either through ignorance or haste. They only find out about the problem at the deadline, and as a result, their application gets rejected.
I could explain, but Alan Reyes here, he was a big guy in the Conservative Party at one point, and now he's gone independent. I find it a big bummer that he doesn't pursue what he was chasing last year, which was the Governor General and the big waste of our tax dollars that she is. But he didn't.
Why doesn't the department take the simple step of letting them know by email about the missing documents so as to avoid work interruptions, impacts on families and businesses, and unnecessary costs for businesses, immigrants, and government alike? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, it's very important for us to be able to have work permits when employers need them. So I will work with the member to help us solve this problem.
I see that the Honourable Minister is rising on a point of order. The Honourable Minister for International Development.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, at the conclusion of asking his question, as he was sitting down, called the Minister of Employment and Workforce Development Cocaine Randy. That is extremely unparliamentary. And I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to ask him to withdraw
Why
that
would you
remark.
bring
Thank
that
you
up?
very
You stupid Ahmed. Ahmed saying is stupid.
I see that the member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes is rising in response to this point of order.
Speaker, I'm sure that I was referring to the other Randy as Cocaine Randy.
Good one, Mike Perry. Good. What are you going to say?
I will come back to this House.
I'll come back.
After some further reflection.
They're all laughing at you.
I see that the Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm deeply concerned. So you raised the issue of me wearing a pin in the House of Commons. I have to tell you that I stand here proud proudly wearing the pin that stands in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but people within this place are wearing pins for a various number of reasons. One of my colleagues is proudly wearing the moose hide pin to show his support for the causes that are important. You know, people wear poppies within this house. I have many times worn a flag for the Ukrainian Canadian to support.
Order. I'd like honourable members. Honourable members. It's important for the chair to be able to hear the point that is raised by the honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona. I couldn't hear much after the reference to the poppy. I'm going to give the honourable member another 10 seconds just to wrap up after, so that the chair can hear this in order to make a proper determination. The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
I'd like to point out, when I cannot, as a member of the House of Commons, bring up a point of order without being heckled and shouted down by the Conservatives, that imposes as well on my privilege. Now, I proudly...
She does it proudly, though. Poor Johns, have another go, sit down, Chevy. Like, what are they doing here?
Mr. Speaker, I have proudly worn many pins in this House. For example, tomorrow, to mark 1,000 days since Putin invaded Ukraine, I will wear the Ukrainian pin. I need to know whether the Conservatives will call this out as a prop.
It is a prop. Go to the front lines, Heather McPherson. Pick up a gun. Like, sending out those poor old men to fight a losing war.
I thank the honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona. The chair will take that into consideration and will come back to the House if necessary. I saw the honourable minister rise on her feet for a point of order before I saw another honourable member. So the honourable member, the honourable president of the Treasury Board, Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to submit a message from Her Excellency, the Governor General of Canada, signed by her own hand.
It's not that is not a point of order that the honourable member is rising. We will get to that point, which is important, but it is not a point of order. I saw l'honorable député.
Honourable member for Lac Saint Jean. He's rising on a point of order.
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There has been consultation amongst the parties, and I think you will say that there.
Nope. We're not listening to what the Bloc has to say. I'm not going to listen to that. Like, Alexis Brunel Ducept, like, whatever. You're a fake. Get out of there. Nothing against you, really, but, like, time's up. We'll show this, though, which is
the virtue. Now,
you know, there
we will get to this.
That there is a actually become
no.
Yeah, the other one too. Just Prime Minister, this Liberal Prime Minister that
in terms of, you know how they, when you bombs, in terms of misrepresent
stealing from members of First Nations communities. He should resign.
Yes, absolutely.
And here we are today, again dealing with more revelations about this Liberal Prime Minister's minister from Alberta, from Edmonton. And there's lots of proud Albertans who serve on this side of the House, and I know that it's a real challenge for them to have to hear over and over and over again who this Prime Minister, this Liberal Prime Minister, has elevated to Cabinet to represent that province. Because he doesn't represent the people and the values of the great Canadian province of Alberta. And nor does he represent the values, the hardworking Canadians from across our country. Now, we've heard that today in debate from representatives of this Prime Minister that there's some kind of conservative fiction, but they're telling on themselves. Because after 9 years, the facts have become really inconvenient for this NDP Liberal coalition. It's just shocking. Liberal cabinet ministers shifting Indigenous identity scorned. It's from the National Post. We've got from Global News, Ethics Committee reports, the Ethics Committee reopens inquiry in wake of new Randy texts. Multiple texts about other Randy blamed on autocorrect by the minister's former business partner. Minister from Edmonton, past questions. Now I want to zero in on this for a quick second. This is from Le Devoir. And there's been a lot of talk about the other Randy. And how many other Randys are there? Well, let's start with fake journalist Randy. Because this article in Le Devoir from June 27th lays out the disproven claim by that Liberal minister at the heart of this scandal that he claimed that he was a journalist. So we've got journalist Randy, reported in Le Devoir. We've got across the Canadian media spectrum, including in their CBC, his fake claims about being Indigenous. So we've got that other Randy. In committee, we had Liberal members say that the other Randy might not even be Randy, it might be Randeep. So we've got the cover-up Randy. And
do you guys remember when Iqra Khalid was saying, like, what if there was another Randy named Randeep? I've got to be honest, man. Mike Barrett is going up levels because I appreciate his sense of humor. He's being funny behind these like facts that he's stating, but he's being funny, like comical.
Now, today in the news,
of how obvious it is.
We have cocaine Randy. The cocaine connection, if you can imagine, with a Liberal cabinet minister. His business, it's not like he owned a 1% share in a company. 50% of the business owned by that Liberal minister. And what was this business? It was a pandemic profiteering enterprise, to be clear, that's now at the center of more than a half dozen fraud allegations.
You should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting.
Sorry, gang. I don't know what happened there. We do have to wrap up the show. I've got to make a video about what Mike Barrett did there today. Like, a number of Conservative MPs really did take a stand. Cooper comes to mind. But Barrett put it down. And I've got to run and make a video about that. It was a fun question period. Like, a lot of things went on. We even saw Mark Holland get up and show his bullet head tough guy stance, and Mark Miller up there being a doofus, trying to take a round off of Poilievre. Good luck, stupid. Anyhow, my name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. We have a lot of new faces that are in the chat room today. Welcome. Thank you for hanging out. Watch your Canadian politics here. We're trying to give it to you straight, but we've got to run and make this other video. Man, Mike Barrett really does seem like he will not ever let this drop. So hopefully he's got Larry Brock's here, and that when there is an election, we'll actually charge this little goof Bolsonaro with crimes. He shouldn't just be fired, guys. He's running blow through his profiteering on the pandemic business through the government, running blow through that. And again, like Mike just said, he's not a 1% stake owner. He's half and half, and he chose the other half, eyes wide open, to be Stephen Anderson. For whatever reason. I've got a couple of guesses at what those might be. And it's not just like squirrels and chipmunks and blowjobs. Like, I think that he thought that he could take advantage of somebody that was as flexible in their identity. Your identity shouldn't matter, man. Like, you're a person, you're just a number. If you can, we won't get into that. Thank you very much for watching Ehren Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe, get notified. We're doing more live shows. I might re-show this later tonight. If I can get through this video, make it quick enough, we'll be back with something else. There were a bunch of other crazy committee meetings too today, but the hot topic, Randy Bossino. Where's the other Randy? There's only one Randy. Is he Indigenous? How much blow did he import? Like with his friend, Stephen Anderson, who, if you've ever seen that guy, makes you question Randy Bossino even more. Minister of Employment. What a joke. Anyhow, gang, we're on our way out. This is it. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal. Thank you all for hanging out. Oh, yeah.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here? Oh, yeah.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF.
Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The wild step work.
The one we call Canadian.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
The 30th sitting day following the adoption of this order.